Hello everyone, my name is Mark Shackstead and welcome to this presentation that's titled Learning versus Performance. This was first delivered as part of a larger Zoom call meeting in collaboration with Ali Smith and Ski Definition, but for anyone that missed it or just wants to have access to this presentation again, I just thought I'd provide it, but also with a little bit of dictation to add to what's on top of the slides itself. And the real intention of this is that hopefully by differentiating and defining the differences between learning performance as a bit of an overall general concept, is that hopefully this allows us to understand these differences so that we can practice more effectively, and from a teacher standpoint of view, help keep our students a bit more focused so that they can practice more effectively. With that in mind, the science guys have already done the heavy lifting for us and defined some of this stuff, so we're going to use their definitions. Learning is assessed by retention and transfer, so can you do it again on a later effort? And can you transfer it to another task? For us in the ski world, that's something like a different size turn, different speed, different terrain. On the performance side of things, we're really talking about a general ski performance or general overall performance of skiing, as opposed to the specifics of ski performance during a turn. So for whatever skill level you have, what's the best that you can ski? And that is assessed by the amount of errors you made. So for as well as you can ski, did you do that consistently as you went down a slope? And that then kind of leads us into two kind of key points, key takeaways that the science guys came up with from their studies. And that's one, that learning can take place with no improvements in performance. So there is an element of making mistakes and trial and error while learning. And that as you do that, you can imagine that means that we don't necessarily ski more consistently. In actual fact, we might find that mistakes and errors crop up more during learning. So we might find that performance even drops during learning. And for me, this is the real kicker, is that improvements in performance can take place with no learning occurring. And what that kind of means in a learning context is that you might make less mistakes as you're developing, as you're learning something new or expanding your current skill set. But that improvement in performance doesn't actually mean that any learning occurred. When you come back to it later on, you might not have retained it and you might not be able to transfer it to another task. So that's where the original definition kind of really helps us understand that sentence as well. For me, I kind of finish this quite simply, is that learning is about developing skills. So skills that you have or skills that you don't have yet, a new or existing skill, taking it beyond what you can currently do. Whereas performance is about applying the skills that you have, the overall technique that you have, into your everyday skiing or the run in front of you. You know, it's where you make decisions about, well, I'm going to make a short turn or a long turn down here, I'm going to go fast or slow. And we do that just applying what we have, not when we're learning something new. Now, if we then go through a bit of a process here where we consider how we could put this into use, we might consider how we'd go from the skier on the left to the skier on the right. And if we start with the assumption that skier on the left, that is the most amount of edge angle they can make between their skis in the snow, then could also say that skier on the right, that is probably about as close to maximum edge angle that you could create. So then we start to think, well, okay, so my goal here is to increase edge angle. You know, we could have the side note that being able to reduce edge angle is every bit as important, but our goal here is increasing edge angle. So we need to have a little bit of knowledge about how we're doing that and the movements achieved. And so we can think, well, it's a sideways motion of the ski, that means some sideways movements of our body. We can make some quick comparisons to that picture that, you know, our hips are going to get closer to the snow, they're going to be further inside the turn. My legs need to be able to work independently of each other, and we can then start to formulate some ideas on how we're going to implement those movements and try that. And for me, that's the really important element, is that we need to stay focused on that skill-based goal, the thing we're trying to develop. Because as we try these different things and these different movements to get from where skier on the left to skier on the right is, certain things might happen. And we want to be aware of what some of the things that we expect to happen might be, but it's also worth being aware of what some of the unintended, unexpected consequences might be, i.e. as we increase edge angles, we move further inside, maybe we lose balance on the outside ski. But that's just feedback, it's just information. And I would challenge you to, in that kind of mindset, to consider that maybe if we lose balance to the inside, it's an indication of achieving the skill-based outcome and staying focused on learning and staying in that learning mode, as opposed to considering that losing balance on the outside ski was a negative thing and making an adjustment to get better balance on the outside ski, which would be more of a performance orientated focus to making adjustments and future practice. And that's really important, to be aware of all of those things and to translate that information correctly for the adjustments that you make. And you can consider how that focus and those adjustments might change as we go on a path of learning and learned and performance. So for you, if you're trying to put this into practice out there on snow, well, I think there's a couple of things that you're responsible for. And the first one is don't sweat the small stuff. Forgive yourself the mistakes, especially if they're a potentially intended consequence of learning. As we just kind of mentioned in that last example, if you are trying to move further to the inside, but you find yourself getting out of balance and losing balance over that outside ski, that's not something you need to give much attention to. You don't need to beat yourself up about that, because we're staying focused on that skill-based goal. And that's something that really helps us to keep the feedback that we receive, and that's feedback of all types, and there are lots of different types of feedback, is it really helps us to just use that information to ask why that happened, as opposed to saying that was good or bad and making decisions based on an opinion of that feedback. And hopefully that focus allows us to pay attention and to really hone in on how we're moving, how we're making these changes and adjustments, whilst paying attention to the outcome, paying attention to what happens for future practice attempts. And it's at this stage where I'd maybe get you to consider of where you maybe went out specifically trying to learn something, but you maybe got yourself caught out and made changes based on performance rather than trying to achieve a skill development goal. And that's kind of something that I've kind of called a bit of a performance trap, as it were. And we just need to be aware that this process, it really does take time to be able to get a new movement, a new skill to a point of being able to repeat it on command. Having retained it, it's going to take a fair bit of time. We might have heard that phrase that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become an expert at something, but maybe a much lower ballpark is 20 hours of deliberate practice to become just pretty good at something, where we might be able to retain it and transfer it a little bit. Because even once we're at that stage, the practice continues to a point where we are trying to apply this in that variety of performances. A variety of ski turns and speeds and terrain. From the instructor side of things, well, lots of different associations have their own tools. And it's kind of interesting if you consider all those different countries and certifications that use an experiential learning model as their backbone behind what they do. Well, they then organize that information in a way that works for them, but they're all trying to do the same thing. And I think if you have an understanding of these overall kind of concepts, these general concepts, it allows you to apply the knowledge and the tools that you have to take your students on a learning journey. And as you do that, your role then becomes to help your students stay focused on the intended outcome as opposed to a performance outcome. And to keep that focus positive, I think is huge. I kind of written here that learning is hard, and people generally like to do what feels good and shy away from what doesn't feel good. And we've probably heard that saying that change is strange. Well, when we're making mistakes and we're making these changes, it's our role to then help our students stay focused on what we're trying to achieve and what's happening as they're trying to achieve it, and staying focused in that direction, as opposed to that performance trap, as it were. And as some final thoughts as we finish up here, when you go out, if you're the one putting this into practice, know what you're going out to achieve. If you're going out specifically to learn something new, to push what you can currently do to new limits, to new levels in terms of the range and rate of movements that you have, stick to that, be honest and sincere with that approach, and look to keep yourself in that learner mindset, in that learner focus. Because let's say you go out there with more of a performance focus and you only draw that bullseye, you only point yourself at wanting to achieve that bullseye, you've only got two options. You either hit it or you miss it. And that's where I think we lead ourselves to being very critical and overly critical. It's human nature to ski a run, make 100 turns, and 99 were good and one was bad, and we focus on the bad one. And that's because we didn't hit that bullseye on one turn. But if we kind of just open that mindset up just a little bit and draw the whole target, then we put ourselves on a path of, well, maybe a different focus or a different direction we could go in is, well, I want to be able to hit any ring at any distance in any situation. From a ski side of things, that's, can I make any turn at any speed, on any terrain, in any situation, under any conditions, and with the icing on a cake, with any level of ski performance. And you can imagine that's quite a lifelong goal to have, to set ourselves, but a worthwhile one pursuing nonetheless. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. If you'd like to see this presentation given in its slightly longer and fuller format as part of the larger Zoom meeting, you can contact me for the link, or contact Ali Smith with Ski Definition as well to get that, and join us on Facebook and join the website. Thanks very much. Look forward to seeing you again soon.